The show, we gave you an update on this shooting in Santa Fe, Texas, at a high school, and now the death total's at 10. Here is an interview with a student from Santa Fe High School, and this is obviously this is a horrible tragedy. It's also just tragic that our kids have to live with this potentiality.
I managed to keep calm through it all. There was another girl who was just freaking out. They were struggling really hard to keep her calm. It was really scary.
Was there a part of you that was like, this isn't real, this would not happen in my school?
No, there wasn't.
Why so?
It's been happening everywhere. I've always kind of felt like eventually it was going to happen here too.
I mean, just imagine that we send our kids to school every day with this notion that they think there's a certain inevitability that someone's going to come in and shoot a dozen of their classmates. I mean, just contemplate the idea of our students going to school thinking about this every day. It is absurd. And yet it is a perfectly rational response, as this young woman stated, because she had seen it happening across schools around the country. And the idea that, there was a generation that grew up with the idea that it's possible we may have some type of nuclear confrontation, and that they would do drills, and you would go down to, you would go under your desk, or you would go down to the nuclear shelter. And of course, that was something of which we had some control over, but there was obviously another major player involved in this. This is something that's completely within our capacity as a country to remedy. And yet, there is simply not the political will to do so. It's pathetic. And it's just absurd. Didn't Abbott, the governor of Texas, were you just telling me that he had tweeted out a couple of years ago? Yeah. Upset that Texas, here it is, Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, back in October of 2015. I'm embarrassed. In fact, he's so embarrassed that he capitalizes the word embarrassed. Texas, number 2 in nation for new gun purchases, behind California. Let's pick up the pace, Texans, at NRA. Now, let me just say one thing, too, about this Santa Fe shooting. I haven't read too much about it yet. It took place just before we came on air. Obviously, we've been on air. I haven't had the opportunity to read it. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that these 10 people died because a gun was used, as opposed to all the other methodologies that one could have to kill a person, that I'm going to guess it was a gun. Am I clairvoyant? Do I have some type of natural innate ability to, investigative powers? No, it's because if the guy, am I a genius that I know it's a guy without even knowing who the suspect they have in custody is? Because the guy was able to kill 10 people. I don't know how many were injured. He was not able to do that with a knife. Not have been able to do that with a baseball bat. Even he was highly determined. In fact, I'm going to go out on another limb and say this was not a .22. It was not a bolt action rifle that you would use if you were hunting, let's say. I'm going to go way out on a limb and say that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it was a semi-automatic weapon of some sort. And I have not read a single thing, and I may be wrong. But if I'm right, is it because I'm some type of genius or clairvoyant? No, it's because this is pretty obvious. You don't have to be a gun expert. I'm sorry, folks. Oh, and speaking of which, I should also add this. You know what? We got a clip of we had 2 responses to Dum Dum what's his face on Fox?
Tucker?
Tucker Carlson. Apparently, there's clips of the AR-15 doing 150 rounds per minute. And somebody also pointed out 150 rounds per minute is a rate. It is not the amount. So
Even if you're only doing it for like 12 seconds?
the gun could be firing at 150 rounds per minute, but if you only do it for 12 seconds, people can do, let's say 10 seconds, so I can do the math here a little bit. 1/6 of 150. Let's say it's 20 seconds. I can't do the math, but
We don't do that.
But the fact is that, yes, it is the equivalent of like I'm going 100 miles per hour. That doesn't mean that I drove 100 miles because I didn't drive for an hour. I just drove for 10 minutes. Unbelievable.
Do you recall the China example?
Yeah, there was some guy who went crazy in China. He had a knife, right?
It was a horrifying. Well, it was just the closest analogy because he attacked. I believe it was a preschool, and it was a, globally reported horrifying incident. I believe nobody died. That sort of being the point.
Yeah.